Are you an atheist? Or do you believe in God? You're about to hear two opposing arguments. One is for God, one is against it. Let me know which you agree with in the comments.
You believe that only people who are religious are ethical and moral?
No, I just believe if you don't believe in God, then where's your moral barometer? That's just me talking.
I
You can
understand
believe what
you.
you want to believe,
Yeah.
but if you're an atheist, you're basing your goodness and morality on what? I mean, but what is an atheist? I don't really get into that. You know, I've talked to people all the time. I'm an atheist. I just walk away. I don't know what to say to you. You know,
Well, an atheist is someone who doesn't quite believe that there is somebody out there, some God out there.
so then to me, you're an idiot.
Okay, well,
So I'm cool with that.
But
I'm just not,
that's
probably
fine.
not the right politically correct
No,
thing
no,
to say.
no.
But if you don't believe in God, I mean, really, you gotta have an explanation for this. You just can't tell me this spun out of a gastrous ball.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, then we were evolved from monkeys. Why we still got monkeys? It's too much open here. I just believe that, and if you don't believe that, then I don't like talking to you.
I see.
But are atheists really idiots? They do have what seems to be a reasonable explanation behind their non-belief, as Neil deGrasse Tyson explains.
Is there a particular God you have in mind that you want me to comment on? If you go online in a Google search, you type gods worshipped by humans. There's a tally of all the gods ever worshipped by humans in the history of civilization. And it just goes screen after screen after screen after screen. So when you say, do you believe in God? Which God? Is it Zeus? Is it Poseidon? Is it the Jewish God? Is it the Christian God? Because the Jewish God from the Old Testament is filled with wrath and smoting and smiting. And the New Testament, God is kinder. You look at all of this and say, is that the God you want me to comment on? Or is there some other God? Typically, it's the Judeo-Christian blend there. In that context, I would say in my studies of the universe, I value evidence and I don't see evidence for any kind of active intelligence or power over anything.
And Neil deGrasse isn't alone. Atheism has been growing in recent times, and Ben Shapiro talks with Edward Feser about why this might be the case.
Religious activity are going down in the West. Levels of religious belief are going down in the West. Is it just that people have never dealt with these arguments, or they decide that they're not interested in hearing the arguments because it's more fun to be atheist than not to be atheist? Why is atheism gaining? Does it feel?
It's a little bit of both. I would say, speaking from the perspective of an academic philosopher, a major part of the problem is the hyper-specialization of modern academic life. We just know so much about so many different things. You could spend your whole life, for example, just doing molecular biology and never read anything in any other discipline, and you still will not have plumbed the depths of that one field. It's not a little field, but that one field, molecular biology, right? That's true even in philosophy itself and in different academic disciplines. They've all got their sub-disciplines, and you could spend your whole life just studying the sub-disciplines. Now, what follows from that is that you have fewer and fewer generalists in modern academic life. In other words, people who try to look at the big picture. If you're talking about an Aristotle, or to go back, far fewer centuries, a Descartes, or even to go back 100 years, 150 years, the average philosopher or scientist in those days, for most of the history of Western thought up until about a century or so ago, could literally be a know-it-all. You could still master all the different bodies of knowledge, and you can know a lot about philosophy and a lot about physics, and a lot about biology and all the rest. Much harder to do that now. So part of the problem is that you get people outside of philosophy, but also even people within philosophy who simply don't know a whole lot about the kind of arguments that I talk about in the book. They may know nothing more than whatever cliches were trotted out in their introduction to philosophy class when they were a freshman or a sophomore, and they heard some of the canned objections that were aimed at caricatures of Aquinas or Aristotle and Leibniz, and then they never look back. And then they repeat it to their own students when they teach an introduction to philosophy class, say. So part of the problem is just that. It's lack of knowledge on the part of your average intellectual or your average academic, because modern intellectual life has become so specialized and fragmented. It's hard to know enough about the issue. Unfortunately, ego prevents people from refraining from talking about things they don't know about. So you'll have someone like a Richard Dawkins, for example, who's undeniably a brilliant man, a very good writer and so forth. He knows a lot about biology. Unfortunately, he knows very little about philosophy and even less about theology. But for some reason, that doesn't keep him from pontificating on those subjects. So he trots out the stock objections that he might have heard when he was an undergraduate, and he doesn't bother to sort of do the research and so forth. And so what happens is when someone with that degree of prominence repeats these same tiresome and tired objections, then that gives them new life, because people think, well, Richard Dawkins, he's a smart guy, he's an Oxford professor, he must know what he's talking about. No, not necessarily. But that gives a whole other generation of young people, students and so forth, the same erroneous ideas about the arguments, and so they get perpetuated that way. That's another part of the reason.
What do you think? Are atheists idiots or not? Let me know in the comments, and if you found this video interesting, hit those like and subscribe buttons, and I'll see you next time.